on finding the right spot. We sincerely apologise. University of South Australia is having a major education conference. So all the lecture theatres were completely booked out, except this one because they couldn't find it, so they gave it to us. So I'm so sorry. We've been so busy that even to make signs, we didn't have time. So it's just been mad crazy. We ran from the event right here, 5 minutes before 6 to set up. So let us begin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm going to speak in English, if that's okay, and we will have interpreters for the camp survivors, and the presentations will all be in English. So first and foremost, welcome, and I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the land of the Ghana people. I'd like to pay my respects to their past, present, and emerging elders. This land has been, was, and always will be theirs. Thank you. Today we have two really good speakers, and then we will hear the stories of Ms. Kalbun Nur Siddiq and also Mr. Omar Bakali. The two camp survivors who will tell you the stories of the horrific tortures of what they went through and what they have experienced in their time in East Pakistan. So without further ado, since we're a little bit late, I'd like to invite sorry, we were a bit confused. I'd like to invite Zumrat Adkin, who will be speaking about forced labour in the global context and also the Uyghur forced labour in the global context. Please make welcome Zumrat Adkin. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramilada. Assalamu alaikum, Karimdashla. I would first like to pay my respects to those who have lost their lives in the recent Urumqi fire that took place on November 24th. This fire happened because actually people have died as a result of the harsh COVID-19 policies implemented by the Chinese government. So my respect goes to them and their families. Today, I will be speaking on Uyghur forced labor and how how also the ongoing genocide relates to forced labor, but also how we can act here to put an end to it. My name is Zumrat Adkin. I'm the Current Program and Advocacy Manager at the World Uyghur Congress. It's an international umbrella organization based in Germany. So we traveled here last week from different parts of the world, from Europe and the US, to meet with policymakers here in Australia to urge them to take action to not only condemn but also to take urgent and tangible action to end Uyghur genocide, but also specifically Uyghur forced labor in the context of the review of the Australian Modern Slavery Act. So today, actually, I'll be speaking on behalf of the Coalition to End Uyghur Forced Labor. And just as a disclaimer, we refer to the region as East Turkestan, which is the preferred name by Uyghurs. But we don't use Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region because it has a colonial connotation to it. But today, because I'm speaking on behalf of the coalition, our coalition uses the term Uyghur region. So this is just like a small introduction. So the coalition is was actually launched in July 2020 as a result of work from different organizations that came together and recognized that Uyghur forced labor was becoming an important and urgent issue to be addressed. Not only by Uyghur organizations, but beyond that, by world leaders and international organizations. So there was a need to create a platform, a network to address this issue. So when we launched 2 years ago, we were only about 20 organizations, among which were only 3 to 4 Uyghur organizations. The World Uyghur Congress was one of the initiators. But today, 2 years later, we are over 450 organizations that are in this coalition. And we have over 5 Uyghur organizations sitting on the steering committee. Today I would like to first start with a brief introduction on the current genocide, the human rights violations that are occurring in East Turkestan, and how, because it is directly linked to modern slavery and Uyghur forced labor. You might have all seen or read the news that since 2016-2017, the Chinese government has started a harsh campaign basically targeting Uyghurs and other Turkic people in East Turkestan, where all of their freedoms, basic rights have been violated. Today, there are at least 3 million of Uyghurs and Turkic people who are arbitrarily interned in concentration camps. When the Second World War ended, the international community promised never again, and yet we are here witnessing another genocide, another concentration camp. Beyond the concentration camps, the entire region is like an open air prison where people who are living outside of the camp network are also living in fear and in terror, because the Chinese government as a state has effectively criminalized the Uyghur identity. So our culture, our religion, our ethnic identity has been criminalized. Today, being Uyghur, being a Turkic person in East Turkestan is a crime. You can be sent to a concentration camp only for being born as a Uyghur person or a Turkic person. We have had many document leaks, official Chinese document leaks, in the past 2 years. I'm talking about China Cables, Xinjiang police files, Karakaşlis, Aksulis. All of these documents were coming directly from Chinese government, and it clearly indicates and states the harsh policies, the kill orders, and the different methods of torture, and also the reasons why people are being interned. So people, for example, women who have had many children, men who are wearing a beard, people who have traveled to Muslim majority countries, people who have had contact with their relatives abroad. These are reasons, simple reasons, to be sent to internment camp. So beyond that, there's also a mass surveillance network that has been implemented ever since the appointment of Kim Chang-ho as police secretary to the region in 2016. He was previously appointed in Tibet, and he was basically the engineer of the mass surveillance network system in East Turkestan. The Chinese government has also been separating families by introducing different directives and policies over the years. For example, children are being sent to state-run boarding schools, and I think in Australia, all of you are familiar with boarding schools and what they mean. I am also from Canada, and I know very well what it meant to the Indigenous people of Canada and also Australia. And today, we are seeing Uyghurs and Turkic people in East Turkestan, their children being taken away, where their parents are living in these camps, interned in these camps, and their children are taken away to be stripped away from their ethnic and cultural identity. In these camps, the conditions are extremely horrible. We are speaking of torture, mental, physical torture, but also sexual violence that is being also witnessed by different people, detainees, women who are subjected to rape and other sexual humiliations methods, men who are also subjected to the same things. We will have camp survivors later on who will be sharing the conditions inside these camps, so I won't really spend a lot of time on that. The government has also been implementing policies of forced sterilization, where the Uyghur women, especially in the south, which is predominantly Uyghur in population, have been forcibly sterilized by the state. And then, of course, religious persecution, cultural erasure. We've had thousands of our mosques, shrines destroyed over the past few years. So this gives you an overview of the current human rights situation, the current genocide that is taking place in our homeland, East Turkestan. And I'm going to now talk about Uyghur forced labor and how it is tainting global supply chains. So Uyghur forced labor is actually widespread among supply chains of 17 plus global industries, which includes predominantly apparel and textiles, information and communication technology, and solar industries. So 1 in 5 cotton garments in the global apparel market is tainted by Uyghur forced labor. Cotton is being picked mostly by hand, hand-picked in East Turkestan, and Uyghur forced labor is predominant in the cotton industry. 45% of the world's solar-grade polysilicon, which is used to produce solar panels, its supply is coming from East Turkestan, actually. So as most democracies, as most countries are shifting to cleaner energy, they're procuring solar panels, but most of it is coming from China, which most of it is actually tainted with Uyghur forced labor. And 10 of the largest ICT companies' supply chains are also linked to Uyghur forced labor. And others, there are other sectors who are at high risk of having Uyghur forced labor, which includes agriculture, so the tomato and ketchup that you're eating might be actually coming from Uyghur forced labor, because the tomato industry is also heavily tainted with Uyghur forced labor in our region. Automotive industry, we have also recently had new research indicating that vinyl flooring, so the PVCs used in constructions and everything in your home, you have PVC flooring, all of this is also tainted with Uyghur forced labor. Toys and of course beauty. So our coalition has actually been calling on companies with global sourcing operation and business relationships in East Turkestan to fully actually comply with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which is the first ever legislation in the world to address the specific issue of Uyghur forced labor, which bans all imports of products coming from the Uyghur region, and it has a rebuttable presumption that I'm going to explain later on. And we're also calling on the companies to apply a single global standards consistent with the requirements of the law across their entire supply chains, so from bottom to top, and avoid bifurcating their supply chains. And we are also calling on them to refrain from re-exporting the goods that they've already been denied entry to the US, for example, under the auspices of UFLPA and attempting to sell it in other countries, for example, Mexico or Canada. In terms of recent developments, we've seen since the UFLPA has come into force, and even before that, actually, between 2020 and 2021, the US Customs and Border Protection, CBP, has issued 11 withhold release orders banning the import of cotton, apparel, silicon, and other products linked to Uyghur forced labor. And in June 2022, the UFLPA has come into full force, and it codifies basically the central elements of our call to action, which calls on companies to basically exit East Turkestan at every level of their supply chains and cut ties with suppliers implicated in forced labor. So I've mentioned the rebuttable presumption. It basically means that the proof now lies on, the burden of proof lies on the shoulders of the companies, basically. So they have to actually prove any product that is coming from East Turkestan is, there is going to be an assumption that it was made with forced labor, and it is up to the companies to prove that it's not. So this is the actually really strong part aspect of this law. And as of March 2022, 9 companies have publicly committed to our call to action. So these companies are shown here on the screen. So ASOS, Island Fisher, Marks & Spencer's, New Look, OBS, Reformation, Seawold, Cornwall, TFG Limited, and Week Fashion. These are the brands that have committed to exiting East Turkestan. We also have private endorsers and who have committed to also exit, but in a private manner. And these include very big retailers. And in September 2022, just 2 months ago, the European Commission has also introduced a similar law, the Directive on Due Diligence, which basically it's an instrument to also ban any forced labor products coming into the EU markets. So now we're working on making this law stronger and more focused on also Uyghur forced labor. And in July and August, you might have seen or read the news that there were two important reports from the UN. So the first one was by the UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery, Tomoya Okata, who in his report outlined that there was modern slavery, there was Uyghur forced labor, and these crimes constituted crimes against humanity. And 1 month later, the UN High Commissioner at the time, Michelle Bachelet, she published her much-awaited report on the human rights issue in East Turkestan, and she concluded that there was forced labor as well. Now I want to tell you why this matters to you, to Australia, because at least 100 international brands are directly linked to factories using Uyghur forced labor, many of which are actively working in Australia. And China is the world's dominant manufacturer and exporter of yarn, textiles, and apparel. And they've actually in 2018 exported 7.9 billion Australian dollars worth of textiles and garments to Australia. And you can assume that the majority of this is tainted with Uyghur forced labor. And with the Modern Slavery Act review, Australia has the obligation as a free and democratic government to strengthen this legislation to prohibit the import of Uyghur forced labor, and there are many, many ways to do that. We have submitted a submission to the Modern Slavery Review Commission, and we've recommended Australian government to strengthen the MSA by including an import prohibition mechanism with an explicit provision ban products from the entire region and supply chain tainted with forced labor. So in the upcoming weeks and months, we will be seeing the results of that work. This was actually why we were also in Canberra to meet with Parliament members and also DFAT to urge them to take action. So our coalition has also been engaging directly with companies, so the private sector, and it is through that direct engagement that we've managed to bring on different companies who have committed to our call to action. We also have different committees in our coalition that are focused on different things. For example, we do a lot of multilateral advocacy, so reaching out to different governments around the world to make sure that this issue is a key priority. For the past 2 years, the issue of Uyghur forced labor was adopted as a key issue by the G7 countries during the G7 summit over the past 2 years. So this is a huge, huge thing actually, because Uyghur forced labor is now on the global agenda, and it is being directly tackled and addressed by world leaders. We're also pushing for different governments to adopt laws to make sure that they don't buy products or they don't have products entering their markets, such as the UFLPA. We are also calling on them to impose targeted sanctions on individuals and entities that are responsible for connected to forced labor. One thing that I wanted to also mention here is that I talked about the cotton industry, and one thing that you have to know is that in East Turkestan there's an entity called the SPCC, the Xinjiang Construction Corps, or Bingtuan in Chinese. And it is basically a paramilitary entity that is controlling most of the region, and they have like a military force, but they also control all of the forced labor schemes that are implemented by the Chinese government. So that there are different types of schemes. You have, for example, labor transfer programs where it's called also Xinjiang Aid, that was identified by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, where they take thousands of Uyghur workers from East Turkestan, they transfer them to Chinese cities. They've done it also throughout COVID when most of the world was under lockdown, with absolutely no regards to Uyghur lives, where they send them to factories across China, separating them from their families, putting them in factories, and these factories are also kind of like prisons, because it is surrounded by barbed wire. They're monitored constantly, and they also have, I think maybe you're going to touch on that, the difference with, the difference from the rest, I suppose, modern slavery, like traditional modern slavery, and what Uyghur forced labor is because there's the re-education component to Uyghur forced labor. These workers are also being re-educated, so it's kind of an extension to the camp network. I'm not going to spend too much time on the import bans, but there have been different import bans implemented by different governments. So the EU, Canada, US, and the UK have come together to basically ban the XPCC products as well. There are also different legal actions that have been taken to address this issue of forced labor. In August 2020, the Global Legal Action Network and the World Congress, we've filed a petition with the US Customs and Borders requesting to stop the import of cotton goods, which was successful. And then in July 2021, French prosecutors launched an investigation into 4 fashion brands. These include Zara, Skechers, and others. Against humanity, sourcing goods made with forced labor. And just last month, I was in London because we were challenging the British government, the custom authorities, for their import of custom-made products from the region, which is tainted with forced labor as well. And we're doing a similar action in Ireland. We have, in our coalition, also been asking for investors to basically address this issue, because investors have also, they're playing a huge part on this as well. And we're calling on the investors to identify, prevent, mitigate the risks in portfolio companies that have business activities and relationships with Kyrgyzstan. And also to divest from companies that are connected to these different abuses. So this is also our call to action. Our call to action has also been endorsed by over 50 investors, investor groups. So this is also a huge win. And before, so it's almost over. So I want to also basically speak on what can the public do, the general public do to address the issue, because we're all sitting here. And forced labor, it might be a big thing. It's a huge thing to tackle, not only for us, but for governments and parliaments. Most of the time, they come to us and they say, "How do we tackle this?" Governments, they should be taking this burden. They have the responsibility to step up and say, "Look, we cannot be complicit in modern slavery and the genocide of millions of people." But as we're sitting here as ordinary citizens, we also have a power, we also have a responsibility to stop these abuses, or at least not to contribute or profit of it. As you know, Christmas is coming up. You might all go to go shopping to buy Christmas presents to your friends and family members. So I will urge you to think twice about the goods and the products that you buy in stores, because there's a good chance, there's a high chance that it might be tainted with forced labor. It's not that complicated to identify. If you see that the T-shirt that you're about to buy is made in China and it's in cotton, then you have to think twice, because cotton industry is heavily tainted with labor forced labor. You also have the responsibility to challenge these companies who are involved in labor forced labor. You can do that by different ways, by either holding a protest in front of a store, by meeting, writing to the CEOs, to the directors, and also requesting information. You're not living in China. You have the right to do it. You're living in Australia, a free democratic nation. You are allowed to ask questions. You can write to the directors, you can write to the CEOs, you can write to the employees, you can find them on LinkedIn. This is a tactic that we use often. You can push governments. You can go to your local officials as well. You can write to your government officials to make sure that they take effective action to end labor forced labor. And you can also pressure the Chinese government by different ways as well. So I'm just going to stop here, but if you are from the business community, I would urge you to get in touch with our coalition. If you are just like a simple, ordinary citizen, I would also urge you to look at the materials that we have on our website, the statements and different things. And we also have, I think, a page on how to get involved as well. So I will now give the floor to you.
Okay. Well, some of what I said, I think, sort of reiterate what was said in the first speech. But first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Catherine Christ from the University of South Australia. I am a senior lecturer in accounting, which sounds a little bit random. But I'm also a researcher who is researching the link between business and modern slavery. And I do that research with the Centre for Enterprise Dynamics in Global Economies. As part of my role, I have also recently founded a South Australian Modern Slavery Network. We are a multi-stakeholder coalition of interested individuals, academics, businesses, unions, NGOs, basically everyone. So if you would like to get involved with that at some point, as long as you're interested in ending the problem of modern slavery, we're happy to have you involved. So please reach out to me. So today, Ramilla has asked me to speak about state-sanctioned forced labour and why it is different. So to begin with, I know not everybody is completely across this topic. So what is forced labour? Okay, there are lots of different conventions I can go into. There are different indicators we can use when it comes to identifying forced labour. But if we look here, the ILO Forced Labour Convention 1930 is probably the best known definition. So they say that forced labour, or compulsory labour, shall mean all work or service which is extracted from any person under the menace of any penalty and for which the said person has not offered himself voluntarily. Okay? So how big is this problem? This is scary. 26.7 million people are currently in forced labour worldwide. Of those, 17.3 million are exploited in the private sector. 6.3 million in forced commercial sexual exploitation. And 3.9 million in forced labour imposed by the state. Now, those numbers are huge, and especially if you consider, I go and tell people, when they say, what's your research area? I say, I research modern slavery. What do you think they say to me? But slavery was abolished. Slavery no longer exists. We got rid of it. What are you talking about? And then, or are you talking about the underpaid intern that works weekends? No. I am talking about slavery, and it's not that different to the slavery that used to exist in the days of the transatlantic slave trade. And in fact, many people are surprised to learn there are more slaves in the world today than at any other time in human history. And more slaves today than there were during the entire period of the transatlantic slave trade. So the problem hasn't gone away, it has not been abolished, it's gotten bigger. So, in order to talk about state-sanctioned forced labour, so go back that 3.9 million down the bottom, which is what we're seeing over in China, we need to consider what forced labour is more generally. So, when we think about forced labour, we often look at forced labour as being brought about and driven by a variety of factors. They can be cultural. So we see this, for example, in Southeast Asia, in Thailand. We see, well, but, this happened to me, I'm passing it on. It's something that's happened for generations. And I was reading an article by a very well-known academic in an abolitionist in the modern slavery space, Kevin Bales, And he actually said, when you go to countries like that where it is cultural, he said he's actually met some of these slave masters, the owners. It's very difficult to actually dislike them because he said they are upstanding members of their community, but that's different. That's cultural. And the thing is, with that type of situation, we can help fix it and educate. Socio-economic. We see this in the Ivory Coast in the case of cocoa. When the cocoa price drops, guess what happens? Forced labour goes up. So there's a direct correlation between the use of forced and child labour and the price of cocoa. So it's being driven by economic means. Industrial context, geographic, regulatory context. That could be where countries have signed up to international human rights conventions, they have policies but they're not really policed, so people and local businesses go on about their business using slavery. Now, given the transnational nature, as you can see here, of this problem, what has happened internationally is we've had a lot of action on the part of national governments, mainly from the West, and legislators, focused on harnessing the supply chain power and economic power of really large businesses. So we have, for example, in Australia, the Australian Modern Slavery Act 2018, and that means that businesses with over 100 million in revenue, they have to produce an annual modern slavery statement that has to contain certain things, bits of information. And the idea here is that, well, it's a transnational problem. These businesses are really big entities. They are really powerful, and they can start to use that economic power to convince suppliers to improve their practices, to basically eventually eradicate slavery through working with their suppliers and the suppliers of their suppliers. But state-sanctioned forced labour is different. It is really similar in some ways, but it is not the same beast at all. So what is state-sanctioned forced labour? Anti-Slavery International says here, it's where state authorities might force their citizens to work as a method of mobilising labour for economic development, or it can be a systematic practice to punish political dissidents or discriminate against religious or ethnic minorities, and it can also include exploitation of conscripts and forms of prison labour. That's different. That's got an entirely different motive behind it. And so we need to take that into account when we think about how are we going to deal with this problem. So I think what I want to get across here, state-sanctioned forced labour is not purely economic, okay? When we look at a lot of other forms of modern slavery and forced labour, you'll see a very strong economic motive. It is not just economic, it is a human rights abuse, and it is political. There are political reasons, and this means there is a completely different power dynamic at play. And so just to say that, well, we can leave this in the hand of large businesses and stuff, no, not strong enough, okay? It is a political problem. Political problems need political solutions. Okay, we do have some ways of dealing with state-sanctioned issues like this. We've got the International Court of Justice. It's slow. It doesn't get anywhere. It's ineffective. Yeah, I can see a lot of nodding here. Yeah. So, what we do have, we've got a political problem, human rights abuse, we need a political solution. And so I'm a business researcher, and so if I'm a business and doing business with suppliers from Xinjiang in China, look, what do we have here? Well, we have a situation where they can't use their market power. They can't even access the sites to see what is going on. We often say in modern slavery, and a lot of businesses like to use social audit as a form of dealing with labour issues in the supply chain to make sure suppliers are doing the right thing. In the case of what we have at the moment in China, you can't get in. It's hidden. You don't know. And so set against this, what we have is government denial of human rights abuses. And so if you're a business and you've got suppliers there, you have absolutely no way to confirm or deny what's happening. So you've got no data. And we also have a problem in countries, and it's not just China, there are other countries where this happens too. So, and if you try and get in there and do stuff, there is a massive risk of government retaliation. That is a huge problem to people monitoring and also to whistleblowers. What happens to them? They disappear. They're gone. Okay? So what this unfortunately means at the moment is we need to go on incomplete evidence. And that creates a massive problem. Why? What do we think? Where there's smoke, there is probably fire. Okay? If we've got enough red flags, we can say, you know what, there's a problem. Okay? We don't have to have all the evidence at this point. And what does that mean? This is strong and it goes against what we stand for generally in Australia. It's guilty until proven innocent. You're not giving us the data to show that you're innocent. We've got red flags. We need to go in. We need to find out what is happening in those factories, in those regions, in those areas. If you're not giving us that data, that access, we have to assume you're guilty. Okay? There is no other way of dealing with this problem. And so what does that mean? Well, it means a few things. How do we deal with this type of situation? We're not allowed in, we've got government denial. First of all, education. We have to educate ourselves, we have to educate other people, we have to educate the entire international community. This is an international problem. It's implicating every one of us, okay? Political pressure. It's a political problem. What does that mean? We need political solutions. So we need to put pressure on our own politicians, on politicians in other countries, through the United Nations, however we can. We need to put pressure on our politicians to do something and to take direct political action. That is why this is a little bit different, okay? That is going to be key. Because then businesses, it makes it very easy for business to then say, well, I can't bring that in. That is made with forced labour or the rebuttal presumption. We will assume it's made with forced labour unless you can prove otherwise. Okay? And so we need that, and then if business can say that, it makes it much easier for them to engage on a meaningful level with those suppliers, and it ultimately means over time something will have to change, because otherwise they've lost their market. There's nothing there. And then, and this is why I said I think I'm going to repeat some of what you said, supporting business to divest from any countries, and not just China, any countries, where state-sanctioned forced labour is suspected to be occurring. This is really important. So there are things that we can all do. Okay? Ultimately, though, we do need political action, and that will absolutely be key. And so I'm not going to speak for as long, but there's something I also want you to remember. It's a bit like this iceberg, isn't it? If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. Even with the US legislation, if you can prove there is no forced labour, you've got no problem. Truth is the ultimate defence. But the international community needs to be able to see what's going on. At the moment, we're being told what's up there, what's happening under that surface. There's a lot more going on. If we can't see that, if we're not allowed to go in and to be able to inspect, to talk to the workers, to find out what's going on, we don't know what's going on under the surface. And so basically, without that uninhibited access by international human rights professionals, and we do need an international effort here, whether that be through the United Nations or whatever, where any concerns are raised, where we see these red flags, we have to assume there's a lot more going on under the surface. And so just before I finish, you know, I often get told, and asked, modern slavery, my specialty, and forced labour and state sanctioned forced labour, these are big problems, okay? They're really, really big problems. How can you hope to make a difference? And it was very interesting because I've just come back from annual leave for 3 weeks, and while I was on annual leave, I watched the movie Schindler's List for the first time. And at the end, when sort of the war's over, he was presented a gold ring by the Jews that he saved. And they had engraved on it in Hebrew, he who saves one man, one person, saves the world. And I think if each of us, through our actions, through educating others, through becoming educated ourselves, by boycotting companies, by putting political pressure on our own government and other governments, if all of us can contribute towards saving one person, that can be very powerful and it can be very strong. Okay, thank you.
Kate and Zumrat, I think there's a lot of food for thought and a lot of actions that each one of us can take from here, and hopefully we can pass it on to our networks as well. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the camp survivors to tell their stories, 5 minutes each, and then we'll go into Q&A. We did start a little bit late. The session is supposed to finish at 7:30, so if you do leave, we forgive you, because we found the place really, the furthest place on the planet to get in here, so we forgive you. But for those who want to stay around, we definitely have questions and answers. So please welcome Khalid Siddiq and Halima to translate. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, hürmetli hanımlar, efendiler, kaderli vatandaşlar. Ben Vatımız Şarkı Türkistan, Ürümçi şehrinden ceza lagır şahidi Khalid Siddiq bulman.
Hello everyone, all the our people and other academics and other people who visited today. I'm Khalid Siddiq. I'm one of the camp survivor.
Ben aldı bilen hemenlarını kıymetli vatanlarını çıkarıp bu paylaşım katlaşmalarına köpten rahmet eyledim.
First of all, I'm very grateful for all of you to come here to spend your valuable time and hear my story.
2017 yılı 3. aydan 9. aygacha Şarkı Türkistan Ürümçi şehri Sanfango kurulgan mana bu erler kampusida ben 6 ay mecburi Xitoy tilida ders o'tdim.
From March 2017 to September 2017, I taught Chinese language to the inmates, to the detainees in one of the camps, which is called Sanfango.
Bu binanın etrafları ve korutamın üstleri elektronluk topluluk sımlarla ait katlık oralar.
The camp all surrounded with the barbed wire and with the iron wires.
Binanın içi ve sırtı koridorun içinden tatıp her bir sakçılar kurallı halda ait katlık koşuyordu durdu.
It's totally occupied and surrounded with the armed police in the camp and outside the camp.
Bu lagerlardaki tutkunlar atanmış sınıflara şu kamplardan özlerden kamerlerden tutkunları bana şunda zincirlengen ve kişilengen halda şişlerden ömürlep çıkıdı ve ömürlep kaytıdı.
The detainees, the inmates, they come from their cells into the classroom. They crawled out and crawled in. Actually, I just want to add one thing. Actually, I didn't understand that at first place when she said first time, and I asked her how that happened. Actually, the doors actually not very high and it's not open totally. So when they go into the classroom, they only open like 1/3 of the door. then they have to crawl in, and when they get out, they have to crawl out.
Ular kamerlarda quruq simotus yatıdı. Her günlük tabakıga bir tane Xitay molisi bilen quruq şogur su içidir.
In the camps, in the cells, they all stay in the cement floor. For food, they only eat one bun and watery rice every day.
Ben 6 ay turuş jarayonida bular bırakırdım mı, munchalar kirib juyunib bakını yok.
I have seen them showering within 6 months when I was in there. They have not had any showering while they are in the camps. Within 6 months. Sorry.
Ular her günü yana şundaq 4 xil usulda qiynash olib berildi.
All these inmates, detainees, they are tortured in those kind of 4 torturing method.
Yani elektronlu kaltak, elektronlu tümür orundu, elektronlu kalpak, elektronlu pərləkdən ibarət.
They are electric gloves, electric hat, electric button, and tie the chair.
Bunlar yana kamerlarda 30'dan 40'ca insanlar kısılışıp oturdu, daim almış durdu götürülür.
In every cells, usually 30 to 40 inmates live together in a very, very small, it's very small cell, like 2.5 to 2.5 a meter cell, and within that cell, 30 to 40 people live in there.
Ondan ki ben yana 2017 yılı 9. ayın 11. aygacha mana bu Ürümçi şəhər Sayvaq rayonu Toğun qurulğan qızlar kampusida 3 ay Xitay tili dərs ötdü.
From September 2017 until November 2017, she went to that females camps that's located in Toğun in Ürümçi.
Bu naytı gayet zor selingan kampı bulup, bununla 10 mingga yakın kız ayollar solangan.
It is a very massive camp, and within that camp, nearly 10,000 female detainees detained there.
Tutqun kız ayollarının %90%'i 18 yaştan 40 yaşgacha, 10%'i 40 yaştan yukarı 70-80 yaşlar var.
Among these detainees, 90% of the women, they are from the age of 18 to 49, and rest of the 10% are 50 to 70. Even there are some detainees, they are over 70 and 80.
Tutqun kız ayollarının çarşları bütünlüğü çürütülgen, üstüden mahpus giyimi giygen, ular her düşenbe günde naməlum doğru işçidir, okulurdu ve onların kanalıdır.
All these inmates, all these female, their heads are shaved. Each Monday, every Monday, they take kind of unknown medicine by forcibly.
Ular yana Xitay saqçılarının so'roq jarayonidagi har xil shaklda bosqinchilik uchrab turdi.
And they are always raped, gang raped.
Yani bosqinchilikdan keyingi Xitay saqçılarının qo'l elektron to'qmoqlari bilan ularning faqat jinsiy yo'l tiqish orqali qiynashib bordi.
And those girls, they are tortured, and the metal buttons inserted into their private areas to torture them.
Bu yerda qiz ayollarni odatlar butunlay to'xtatilgan, hatto ba'zi imtihonlarni o'tkazib to'xtatib ketgan.
All these women are sterilized, so their period has already stopped, and even some of the women, when they came in, actually they were breastfeeding. After that, even the milk supply has been stopped.
Kamplarga sirtidagi az bir qism insonlarmi tushlik turmalarda yashaydi.
Besides the inmates inside the camp, the people outside the camps, they are living under the open prison.
Ularmı yana Xitay saqçılarının ahali kontun məcburişida muşundaq hər xil uqturishlarga asosan məcburi tug'mas operatsiyasi qilindi yoki uzuk soldiriildi.
This is an order from the residential committee. It says you have to do sterilization. So all the females in that they are forced to do sterilization.
Turuşdan ait eniq yazılgan, yani 18 yaşdan 59 yaşgacha tug'ut ishidagi qiz ayollar o'z belgilagan doktorxonaga berib, cho'qim bir shikil tekshirish qatnashishi kerak.
Any girls between 18 to 59, they have to go through this procedure, and usually the residential committee, they like a fix hospital or clinic and ask them to go there and to do the sterilization.
Agar bu xizmat moslashmay qolsangiz, soqchixonaga berib, tumur o'tirsiz deb aniq yozilgan.
In this order, it's very explicitly, very clearly said, if you don't comply with these rules, you have to go to concentration camps and to sit on the tiger chair.
Men bu joydagi nurg'ulg'an qiz ayollarga o'xshash 2019-yil 5-oyning oxirida Urumchi shahar Tensa rayonlik Changloyani kumush doktorxonada majburiy tug'mas operatsiyasi qilindi.
I'm not exceptional. I'm not immune to this rule as well. In 2019, May, I went to Changloyuan Hospital in Urumchi and I did the sterilization as well.
Bunun ise bu kız ayollar yani özünün ballarından ayrıtılgan, yoldaşlarından ayrıtılgan, hem atalmış üyüge ortılgan Xitay koşmak er tutanlarını özünün üyüde koruluşuna ve derslere uçurap durdu.
Those female, these women, they are separated from their husbands, they're separated from their children. In East Pakistan, there is a kind of very bizarre thing. It's called twin relatives. So usually the Chinese government, they pair Uyghur families with one Chinese family forcibly and ask them to live together, eat together, sleep together. So that's what Hadnor tells us now. So all the women in the camps, they go through the gang rapes and rapes by the police officers, but outside, the women in their own house, they still go through the rapes by their twin relatives, that's Chinese relatives, that is enforced by Chinese government.
Ulayana, muşunda kurulgan mecburi emgek kul zavatlarda kul işçi olup işleydi.
Also, those people who are in the detention centers, they work in the factories as a slave labor. That's part of the Chinese government policy.
Hazır bana karantin ve korona sebeple şu Uygur halkımızı ayrıp üyelerde ayrıp davalaş, ayrıp tutuştu bana kılıp ular baş koyup oturuyordu.
Now in COVID time, the people in East Pakistan, they are forced to stay in their house without medication, without food. By doing that, government doing genocide, just killing them in their houses.
Tekimi dehşet boğunu yakında 24 noyabr Urumchi şehir Tensa rayonunda joylashgan aholilar binasida ailesi kullandığı 100 günden aşkan nurg'ulg'an insanlarımızı o't ketish manası bilan tirik holda kuyib o'lganligini xabar topdik.
And the worst thing is, just recently we heard from Urumchi, one apartment building caught fire, and all the residents from 16th floor until 21st floor, they are burned to death. They perished.
Bu facia bütün dünya halklarını tekimiz zilzilige ve lerzige saldı.
This event has shocked the whole world.
Ben bir lager şahidi sütüm bilen, en ahırda muş faaliyet katnaşkan herkes kıyırdaşlarımızı ve muş meyli parlament olsun, meyli akademikler olsun, bizge yakın yardımcı bulup, muş Avustralya'daki parlament hükümetki besim işletip, muşların emri tedbir kullanışıga ve bizge yardım buluşunların içinde de ümit kılmak.
As a camp survivor, I really wish all the international community, the governments, Australian government, the academics, the general public, they come to action and contribute their own part and help to stop this atrocity in 21st century.
Allah rahmet.
I've heard this story since last Wednesday, at least 3-4 times a day, and it doesn't get any easier. So I'd like to invite Omar Bakali to tell his story, and I will translate the best I can. Thank you.
Ben bundan 5 yıl burun 7000 kişilik erler kampısında 8 ay zulüm çeken Ömür Bekali.
5 years ago to this date, I was in a concentration camp where it housed 7,000 inmates.
Benim asli doğulgan yurtum Şarkı Türkistan Turpan şehrinde doğulgan.
I was born in East Turkestan in the city of Turpan.
Ben üniversitede tüketip Karmay şehirge hizmetke bağlan.
Once I finished university, I moved to the city of Karmay in East Turkestan.
2006 yıl o yerdeki tamponsuzluq ve erkekliklerin çekilmesi sebebinden ben Kazakistan'a göçüp ketken.
In 2016, when all the concentration camps were established, I moved to Kazakhstan.
Ben 2017 yılgacha Kazakistan'da Tomar Taranis sayar şirketinde direktörlük hizmetinde işlevatdım.
Until 2017, I used to work as a tourist director in the city of Kazakhstan. Country, sorry.
2017 yıl Örümçi'ge konferansa bağlı vaxtımda ata-anamın uyida kanunsuz qo'llandim.
In 2017, I went to visit my parents in the city of Turpan, and I was arrested without any charges.
Sizlar o'ylashingiz mumkin, uni ichidagi qanday insonlardi, terrorchimidi, hammasi bir ashula terrorchi bolalarni deb bilishingiz mumkin. Amaliyotda menga o'xshash har sohada eng yaxshi xizmatlarni qilayotgan doktor, professor, millioner, advokat, injener, her millatning sarxillari bor onun ichida.
You may be thinking that these camps house terrorists, but these camps house lawyers, engineers, academics, business people, such as myself.
Olar bizni qo'lga olgandan keyinla 4 kunduz har qanday narsa qiyin qisqalardi ekan. Men bu ichga kirgandan keyin buni bildim. Men 4 kunduz qiyin qisqalarga o'chirdim, eng vahshiy holatda.
For the first 4 days, I experienced the worst torture possible.
Yani eng oddiysi yo'lbosib o'rindiqqa bog'lab qo'ydi.
The simplest torture is to make you sit on the tiger chair.
Anandan keyin elektrik kaltaklar bilan azoblaydi.
Torture you with the electric batons.
Anandan keyin shu yarastidan shu tom devoriga esib qo'yib, butkul go'sht va a'zolarga qattiq urdi.
So they used to hang us up and then beat us severely with electric batons.
Urdigan asboblar yog'och kaltak.
The things that they torture us with is wooden sticks,
Sim qamcha,
wired ropes,
ham kauchuk kaltak.
electric batons.
Mana bu shunday narsalar bilan qattiq qiynaydi. Anandan keyin hatto tirnoqlaringizni ombir bilan yo'lib tashlaydi.
So these are the tortures that everyone experiences, and they also remove your nails using pliers.
Tirnoqning ichiga yengini tiqqanda miniz chiqadi bu achchiq.
When they insert pins and needles into your fingernails, the pain is so severe your brain hurts.
Shu azoblashlarni olib berishdan burun intayin inchiklikdan shu bütün organlarimizni tashlagan.
Until they torture you, your whole body goes through a medical examination.
Qiynab bo'lgandan keyin yana olib qayta tekshirib, undan keyin bu lagerga meni so'lagan.
After they torture you, they make you go through a medical examination again and put you through into cells.
Men kirgan kamerda 40 odam birga yashadik.
The cell that I was put into, there were 40 inmates with me.
Hammamizning puti kishanlangan, ya'ni put qo'l chetilgan holatda belimizni eganmaymiz, inişken halatda.
Every one of us was shackled with chains that is attached to our wrists and our feet. We could not stand up straight.
Sizlar o'ylamanglar, onun içinde bola til ve kesip günüdür de.
Don't ever think that these are re-education camps to learn languages or skills.
Bunda ustazların onun için ekirip til öğretken şekilde aslında kalanlar ameliyatta şu vaktini öldürsün.
Even though they bring in educators such as Kalbunur into these education camps, this is just to pass time, but to torture.
Bizni 7 rayonga bölüp durup, organın aldığalarını bir tarafga.
They separated us into 7 different categories.
Okugan kasbiga qarab, emgek qo'liqqa aldığalarını bir tarafga.
For those whose organs they want to take out into one category, and those who are educated into another category.
Yaşananlarını bir rayonga.
Those who are elderly into another category.
Andan keyin eng yaş 16 yaşından 40 yaş bo'lgan insonlarni ayrim bir yoqqa.
Those who are healthy between the ages of 16 and 40 into another category.
Maşında kategoriye bölüp durup, bizni men yaşagan şu kampda, Qarmayda 9 kamp var. Eng kichik men yaşaganim 3 qitim keng ko'lamlik odam yetkigan bo'lan.
The camps that I lived in Qarmay, there's 9 that exists there, and I've seen people move and change over 3 times within a camp.
Mesela bir işin deyişini unutib qaptimi. Bunun içinde men axbaratim degan, men nechoqtim demagandim. Hele bizga tamoq taqtirgan insonlarning hammasi gachajimi Xitoylarning. Xitoy tamoq taqtirdi, hech qaysi so'zlayolmaydi. Ya'ni bizning nadaligimizni, qandoq kun ko'rayotganligimizni bilib qolmasunda so'zlayolmaydigan gachilarni tamoq taqtirishga akirgan ashuncha xizmatga juma insonlar.
So the Chinese people who serve us food are chosen, are those who cannot speak, mute. The simple reason they choose mute Chinese people is so that they cannot speak about the atrocities they see every day in the camps.
Meniki 8 ay yaşash jarayonida ota-onam, oilam hech kim qilmagan, men qayerga sulangan, qayerga o'tkirib ketgan hech kim bilmaydi.
For the 8 months that I was in the concentration camps, my family, my parents did not know where I was and whether I was alive or dead.
Men chiqqan vaqtda hatto yo'l mangashni unutib ketib, mangamay qolgandim. Chunki har doim 8 kilo, 7 kilo bo'lgan zanjirlarda shunday yuriyversangiz, nima qiynalib mangamay qolgansiz.
For the 8 months that I was chained from my wrist to my legs, I had even forgotten how to walk straight. It took me a while to be able to take my steps again.
Bizni Xitoy hukumatı yolg'onchi, terrorchi dedi, amaliyotda hech qanday isbot ko'rsatmadi. Bizni har kuni bir kamerada 12 kvadratlik kamerada 2 video kameralar var. Bir yarım saat hayatimizni ko'rsatgan bo'lsa, mana bu yolg'onchi degan bo'lsa, kimning yolg'onchiligi isbotlangan bo'ladi.
They have called us terrorists and extremists, but we were monitored 24/7 with 2 cameras on each cell, in each cell, and to this day that the Chinese government has not released even half an hour to show the world what they are doing to the innocent people.
Men sözümni aqlashtirman, shunday 21-asrda yashayapsakmi, ikkinchi dunyo urushidan keyinmi bu o'lim lagerlari qurilib, bizdagi Sharqistondagi Uyg'ur millatiga bu ajoyib cho'q irqchilik ilib berilyapti.
What frustrates me and angers me is that in the 21st century, another genocide like the Holocaust is being committed and no one is taking action. I end my speech here.
Siz kiyayotgan shu taraflar Made in China bo'lishi mumkin.
The cotton products that you wear today most likely tainted with Uyghur forced labor and Uyghur cotton.
O'zingiz yeyotgan pomidor qiyamlari bizning shu vatanda chiqqan bo'lishi mumkin.
The tomatoes that you buy in the tomato paste comes from East Turkestan.
Shu narsalarni ayolidan, erlaridan ayirib etilgan qiz o'g'illarimiz ishlab chiqargan mahsulotlar bo'lishi aniq.
So those who are working in these labor camps in the cotton industry, in the tomato industry, are young males and females who've been separated from their parents, from their families.
Nəhayət əfsus, bütün məmləkətlər hazır özünün bu Xitay biqində bo'lgan iqtisadi münasibət səbəbidən
for the pure reasons of economic growth and to make money.
Qırğınçılıqqa көз yumib o'tirib, yana Xitoyga so'qsin davom qilyapti.
It seems that the international community has blinded themselves and watching quietly the genocide that's happening.
Buni to'xtatishda har bir insonning majburiyati deb o'ylayman.
To stop this, it's everyone's responsibility, each and every one of us here.
Biz Şarkostan halkı tinchlikni eng suydigan xalq.
East Turkistanis or the Uyghurs love peace.
Mening dadam şu lagerlarda öldürüp taşlanganda,
My father was killed in a concentration camp.
men şu bombalarni tirib, postdan patlatgim keldi, ammo biz tinchlik bilan bu haq huquqimizni qo'llash uchun men uni qattiq o'ylandim.
For the reason that my father was killed in a concentration camp, I also wanted to wear a suicide vest and commit a crime. But we want to get our land back and free the East Turkestan and East Turkestanis with peace and diplomacy.
Bizning sizlarga yashash haqqimiz bor. So'zimni tugadim.
We also have the right to live as free as everyone else here. It doesn't make it any easier to translate, and I've done it for a number of times for Mr. Bakali. And as I can see, there's not a dry eye in this room. I'll open the floor to questions. If you've got questions, please raise your hands, and I will ask the people who will answer to come out to the front. Thank you. Yes. Do you need a microphone, or can you yell?
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
I'm a member of Chinese community, and I'm a uni essay student. And as I mentioned before, that recently the apartment thing happening in Wuxi that causes a huge uprising in China, nationwide, even here. So I understand there are some misunderstanding between the Uyghur community and the Chinese community for the past decades. So I'm wondering, is there any solutions that the Chinese community and the Uyghur community can coexist in the future and even unified in the future, even though we're different? But the thing is, we're in the same situation where we don't have freedom. And the whole China is like a concentration camp. So I do want to hear your guys' opinion of how to, coexist and support each other.
Okay. Yeah, we as activists, as organizations and activists, we realize that our fight is not with the Chinese people. Yeah. Our fight is with the Chinese government, the oppressive government. We coexist for humanity, for peace, and for dignity and humility for all of mankind. So yes, absolutely, our door is open to coexist, to work together, to cooperate, and to work against the oppressor, which is the Chinese government at this stage. So that's all I have to say. I know that every Uyghur here loves peace, as Mr. Omar said, and our door is always open to work together as a community. We know that the Chinese community did stand up in Shanghai and in other states. Unfortunately, due to the fire and death of 10 innocent people, which triggered the uprising, we're happy that they've protested and demanding an end to this. But we also realize that they might also suffer the consequences for uprising, which we feel terrible about. We understand what the Chinese community is going through. In recent times, in the last week, we've realized in Canberra, in Sydney, we've had protests. In Adelaide, we had a protest yesterday. We had a lot of Chinese students. We've always had Hong Kong students and Tibetan students, but we actually had Chinese students standing with us. So thank you for that, and we will all work towards peace.
Thank you.
That's a good question. I just wanted to also add something that we're watching a genocide go on. We cannot close our eyes. You are a bit too late, but I think there are ways to denounce it. And as Rabila has mentioned, our fight, it's a just fight. And right now there's also the issue of denialism. And denialism is actually part of a genocide. During the Holocaust, that has happened. During many other genocides, that has happened. We have had a lot of Chinese denialists. We have confronted them on many occasions where they have refused to believe our side of the story. When camp survivors have shared their stories of pain and trauma, going through it again every time they speak. So we need to put an end to this. And it is your responsibility as a Chinese citizen to bring this conversation to your families, to your friends, to your surroundings, and to respect Uyghurs, to listen to Uyghur voices, to respect our history, our culture, to traditions, respect our land as well. Thank you.
Another question?
To add something to my partner here, we are actually from the new federal state of China, which is founded in 2020, June 4th, to remember the Tiananmen Square issue. If the Tiananmen Square succeeds, Chinese people would already have freedom. But that unfortunately, that voice wasn't heard, and it failed. So it came to 2017, Mr. Mao's school has made us deliver the true message to all Chinese people, especially Chinese living overseas. We've heard his voice, and the story that your guests have told me, I actually already saw it thanks to this whistleblower movement that we are calling it, and I was crying a lot. So I didn't cry today because my eyes already had lost a lot of tears. So the war comes too long and will be long if we don't know how to defeat our enemy. We have only one enemy, which is called the Chinese Communism Party.
That's right.
They are Chinese, they are like us, but they are evil.
Absolutely. And I think Tibetans will stand with us as well, together with the Falun Gong people. They have also suffered extensively, just like us.
We have come to a stage that the information is very easily to access and to be spreaded as well.
That's
but
right.
We need to use the right media to deliver our message. The thing is that the Western world has lost the voice as well, because the Chinese Communist Party has used their money and people to infiltrate the Western media.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the media is not...
Did you have a question? We're just going to, because we're already out of time.
I just hope people can come to our platform, which is GETA, to get more information and tell your story on GETA. I'm sure you will have a lot of support from us.
Thank you very much.
We will hear your story, and your story can be shared.
Do we have? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am mindful of time. Yes.
Sorry, just very quickly. I know you met with. Sorry, my voice is a bit shaky. You met with politicians and people in Parliament, Sydney, Canberra, and Adelaide. What have they promised?
Nothing. Nothing. As politicians do before they come into power, they promise you a lot of things. Once they're elected, their mouths are shut and the opposition speaks. What we can rely on now is NGOs, academics. There are two things that we really need to pressure the government on, and that is the Magnitsky Act, because the Australian government has used Magnitsky Act to sanction Russian criminals, but they are not using it to sanction Chinese criminals. And this is what we've been talking to every parliament member. We're 2 days in Canberra, and everyone, the policy makers in New South Wales, and yesterday as well in South Australian Parliament House. So, you know, we can scream as much as we want, but if each one of you talk to your federal and state members, this is where the pressure is. So there are laws in place. We just need the government to take action now. So they haven't promised anything because trade is too big, unfortunately, with China. But I am sure that, you know, we will get to the end, as Omar Bakri said yesterday. Our land will be ours. We will have freedom, and we will be together again with our extended families back in East Turkestan. Any other questions?
And one thing I'd like to say to everyone about lobbying and about creating attention and action, that Friday the 2nd of December is the International Day for the Abolition of Slavery. So why don't we all use this? Why don't we use hashtags? Why don't we get on social media and use that day, create a bit of noise?
Could you repeat that again?
The International Day for the Abolition of Slavery. Second.
2nd of
December. I only know they're putting out a press release. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. We have time for one last question, and it's 7:30. Yerim oldu. Sen geç başlap kaldı. Keçirgeysler. Sorry. The location was very difficult. Rehana?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the camp survivors how they actually managed to get out.
Sizler kandak kaçtı, kandak çıktınlar.
Kaçmadı.
Ya çıktılar.
Ben Kazakistan vatandaşı, kök pasport, birincisi bu. İkincisi benim ayarım Kazakistan'da, Kazakistan'ın Sırtqı İşler Ministerliği ərizlərini yazıb, anından keyin mediaga Xitoy o'zining application'ın içini kiritishni bak o'qidi. Shu mediaga bergandan keyin shunga men 8 oydan keyin hayot qutib chiqardim.
I hold a Kazakh passport, and my wife in Kazakhstan advocated for me through politicians as well as media. China is extremely scared of its atrocities being known to the rest of the world, so this is the reason how I got out.
Ben milletim Özbek, vatan qaytqan muhacir. Andan keyin vatanda qolgan shu sobiq yo'ldoshim Uyg'ur bo'lganligi uchun u chiqqan yerdan qolib qoldi.
I am an Uzbek citizen, and this is the reason I managed to get out. My husband is Uyghur, and he is still back in East Turkestan.
Mening qizim Gollandiyada 2011-yilda o'qish chiqib qolgan, ham shu yerga vatandosh bo'lg'achqa nihoyat ko'p tirishchilik qildi, endi chiqardi.
My daughter is a citizen of Netherlands since 2011, and because of her advocacy, I managed to get out. Okay, if there's no more questions, we don't have time for comments or extended time. So thank you very much for making the time. Thank you very much for finding the place. And we wish you a wonderful evening. And please thank all our guest speakers, Catherine and Zumradai, for their time, and the camp survivors for coming all the way out here to Australia.
Çok rahmet.